here we are, ready with a new book, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Does that sound kind of silly? Well, put on your imagination cap today. Just use your imagination as you hear this book because it's definitely a little different and you have to use your imagination. It is written by Judi Barrett and drawn by Ron Barrett. And I found out that they were married and they got divorced, but they still worked together on books even before and after the divorce. In other words, they were still friends. And now they're in their 70s. Okay, here's a picture I want you to see. It's a family. There's a mommy making orange juice over here, and the boy is Henry. I'm not sure the girl's name, but they're sitting all around. There, see how the plates at the table? Nobody's eating yet. Whoop, who's on the chair? A cat? And over here is Grandpa, and he's making what? Pancakes. And there is their dog, who looks a lot like Lily. That's where our Lily would be, waiting for some crumbs or something to drop on the floor, right? Well, Grandpa's doing that while the kids are waiting for breakfast. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning, and Mom was making orange juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could eat. And Grandpa was flipping the pancakes. They're saying, I could eat 5 pancakes. Well, I could eat 10. Well, I could eat 15. Well, I could eat 16. And they just kept going up and guessing with each other. And then, all of a sudden, while Grandpa was flipping pancakes, look what happened. The cat jumped down. There's the dog chasing after the cat, and Grandpa got bumped into and flipped his pancake that he was about to turn over. He was like going in to flip it up, and he got bumped, and he went, wah! And he flipped it over his head, and guess where it landed? Plop. Did you ever have a pancake land on your head? I don't think I have. And his sister's like, ooh. And he's like, ah. That would be kind of funny, wouldn't it? And it says that exactly. Seconds later, a pancake flew through the air, headed toward the kitchen ceiling, plop, and landed right on Henry. And what do you think they all did? Laughed. We all laughed. Even Grandpa laughed. And all the other pancakes landed in the pan, fortunately. We ate all of them, even the one that landed on Henry. And you can see below this one that we looked at, here's the family happily eating. Mom, the little girl, Henry, and Grandpa. And they're really enjoying their pancakes, every single one. We like pancakes too, don't we? Well, that night, Grandpa told us the best bedtime story ever. Do you like bedtime stories? He said that the flying pancake made him think of a funny story he could tell. And so here it is. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean. And here they're sitting there in bed, Henry and his sister, imagining. And then they're showing like if they could go on a big trip, like he said, over mountains and water and the desert, far, far away. You can see all these pictures. It's hard when I'm showing them and the screen isn't big enough. Far, far away, in their dreaming and thinking and imagining, was a tiny little town called Chew and Swallow. Listen to that, what I said. That sounds funny, doesn't it? It's not a funny name, but let's listen to it slowly. Chew and swallow. That's what we do when we eat, right? But it was all one word, chew and swallow. You can tell the story's going to be a little different, right? Well, in most ways, Chew and Swallow was like any other tiny town. sort of like Elmhurst or St. Charles. It had a main street, it had stores, houses, trees, gardens, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some cats and dogs. There's a picture. That doesn't look too unusual, does it? Stores and people walking and cars and just the typical things you'd see in a town. People outside. There's a church down there with a steeple. Just some very typical things. But the kind of stores they had were not food stores. There were no food stores in Chew and Swallow. Why? Don't they need to eat? Well, no, they did need to eat. But they didn't need any food stores because it was a little different in that town. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. They just looked up and there came the food. And here is a picture. They're showing a man that looks like Grandpa coming out his door. Cat is next to him and he's holding out his hand like and looking up like what's gonna come down. The dog was looking out the window there too. It never rained rain. There wasn't water coming down. Nope, not here. It never snowed snow. And it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice so they could drink, right? It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas. And sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Oh my goodness. So here we are raining soup and juice. Here comes some peas and globs of mashed potatoes. And here comes the what? Hamburgers falling out of the sky like crazy. Oh my goodness. Makes me kind of hungry looking at it. But that would be different. Every morning, people watch the weather report on TV to find out what they would have to eat that day. That's interesting, isn't it? They would even hear a prediction for the next day's food, sort of like getting your menu at a restaurant and deciding, but it tells you what you're going to get. Here is the man, this Grandpa again. He's at his house. He's getting his umbrella and coat and hat and briefcase. He's ready. He's got his clothes on, ready to go out for the day. There's his doggie. And the weather report is on. And the man is pointing to some clouds and meatballs coming out of him. And he's smiling like a weatherman. We'll tell you, in our town, he would say, we're going to have a chance of rain today, and it'll be later in the afternoon or something like that. Or it's going to get cold today. Bring your jackets. It's going to get down to 50 degrees. Or it's going to snow or whatever. But in this place, they told you about the food that was coming. And this man in the picture is saying it's cloudy with a chance of meatballs. So the man knew before he left the house that he could expect maybe meatballs later. And whatever other food the weatherman said. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, their cups, their glasses, their forks and spoons and knives because they would be catching food from the sky and they wanted to be ready for any kind of weather. And they brought their napkins too. Let's look at some of the pictures. Looks like pancakes for breakfast here, falling out of the sky on a taxi. Here's a football game and there's pie falling out of the sky. One of the players is having a snack. Okay. Here's a lady trying to catch some chicken legs. She doesn't want to miss them. And this little guy and his dog got his food bowl on his head and he's got an umbrella full. It's either soup or juice or some kind of good tasting liquid, collecting it so they can eat it or drink it according to what it is. In this case, he needs a straw because it's liquid. I told you it takes some imagination. If there were leftovers, the people would just take them home and put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry between meals, because it only came at breakfast time, lunchtime, and dinner. So they would grab what they could with their plates and cups and umbrellas and bowls and whatever, plates, and then later on they could eat it if they weren't hungry at that time, or they could save it for a snack. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down, so they had to go out and grab that too. First, there was a shower of orange juice. Then, low clouds of sunny side up eggs moved in. And that was followed by pieces of toast. So that sounds pretty good. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast. Some people like jelly on their toast, and a lot of people put butter on it. And most of the time it rained milk afterwards. So here's an example here. They're getting orange juice, and then eggs and toast, and some milk. There's also the toppings for the toast. Look at the little boys holding up his cup. Even the birds and the squirrels eating some, and the birds in the trees and the squirrels, they're all enjoying it, not just the people, right? For lunch one day, frankfurters in rolls blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. And there were mustard clouds nearby for their hot dogs. And then the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans, because they taste kind of good with hot dogs. And then a drizzle of soda or pop finished off the meal. And here's some people at a restaurant grabbing hot dogs. Looks like they still went in the restaurant, but the ceiling was open so that the hot dogs and the mustard clouds could come in. That guy's jumping for a hot dog right across the lady's table. She looks like she's a little startled there, huh? This guy too. Hot dogs. That sounds pretty good. Just go out your door or go down the street and stick out a plate or reach your hand up and grab a hot dog. And then if you want mustard on it, get a little from the cloud. There's probably a ketchup cloud too for your hot dog. For dinner one night there were lamb chops, and they became heavy at times, with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by a gradual clearing with a wonderful jello setting in the west. So again, they're describing it as it's falling from the sky, and they're kind of describing it as weather. And there's a jello mold way up in the west that they're going to apparently get later. But they got the potatoes and veggies and meat and everything. Well, the sanitation department of Chew and Swallow, that's like the garbage men that come, remember our big trucks that come to pick up our garbage? They had to remove the food that fell on the houses and the sidewalks and people's yards. You can imagine that if a lot was coming from the sky and people were grabbing this and that and the other, they can't get everything. And they saved some things for later, and the animals ate things too, but they didn't need all of it. So there was often food scattered around here and there, and so the garbage men had to pick it up, right? And the workers cleaned things up after every meal, and then they fed all the dogs and cats in case they hadn't gotten enough. And they emptied the leftovers into the ocean for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. Interesting. There they are. They have a garbage truck that looks like a bowl with a lid on top, and they have a spoon and a fork to pick up everything, and a big plate that comes out the front of the truck. They scoop everything in with the spoon and the fork going sideways like this into the plate, and the plate goes up and dumps it in this bowl. The lid comes off, and then they take it away. They make sure those dogs and cats get enough to eat, and then they dump it in the ocean for the fish and the turtles and the whales, they say. Oh my goodness. Life for the townspeople was delicious until one day everything took a turn for the worse. Here is a picture of the newspaper. It says spaghetti ties up town, and there's a picture of some policemen and people and cars, and spaghetti is all over the place. Apparently they got too much of it, and it got wrapped around cars and people, and traffic stopped, cars stopped, and it was kind of a mess. Can you imagine if spaghetti was laying all over your streets and town yards everywhere? That would be weird, wouldn't it? Well, one day there was nothing more than gorgonzola cheese all day. That's kind of a smelly cheese. Tastes pretty good, but by itself, it's kind of stinky. And look at these people put nose clips on their noses because they didn't want to smell it. And the next day there was only broccoli, and it was all overcooked. Too much. Broccoli is good, but if you cook it too long, it gets real limp and drippy like this. And here these people are like having a nice dinner together, but they're kind of like, this isn't too good. How about this one? And the next day there were Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Now, I'll tell you, I like each one of those things in certain dishes, but not together. Brussels sprouts and mayonnaise and peanut butter. And they were having a birthday party, and this little girl says, bleh. They don't look too happy about that for their party, do they? And another day there was a pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the fog. Well, they're saying that the pea soup was so thick that they couldn't find their way through hardly. This man's looking for the rest of the food, and it's floating around, but it's foggy, like there were clouds of soup instead of real clouds. Well, the food was getting larger and larger, and one Tuesday there was a hurricane, that means really super strong winds, of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and there were hard rolls. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat bread. And it was served in toast form, like we had read the other day, the other page. No one had ever seen such big slices of bread or such big rolls before. Oh my goodness. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. They were just coming down like crazy and whirling around in the wind. The mess took the sanitation workers 4 days to clean up the mess. And the sea was full of floating rolls. And here's a little boy. He goes to the beach to play after the storm is over, and he sees all these rolls in the water, and the wind is still a little windy, and you can see some of the animals. There's a crab looking at a roll. And to help out, people piled as much bread as they could in their backyards, but they couldn't use it, and it stayed there a long time, and the birds like bread crumbs, but it got so hard that, look at this, the bird has to peck at it just to get a little piece of bread out of it, because it's like a rock. It's gotten hard from sitting out all that time. And then there was a storm of pancakes one morning, and a downpour of guess what? What do we put on our pancakes or dip our pancakes in? Maple syrup. So they got a whole bunch of pancakes falling down of all sizes, and then maple syrup pouring down like rain. And a huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off, so they had to close the school. And here's a picture of a pancake. It landed, there's a building peeking out underneath. It landed on top, and here is the maple syrup dripping around, and it went on the ground. It almost caused a big flood, which is like when there's too much water to control, and it's in the streets and everywhere. People were getting very concerned. This idea of food coming from the sky that they were used to wasn't working out too good. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick because that's all there was to eat. And they were trying to eat up the food so they wouldn't have it all over the place. But look at all these sandwiches. They ate them so much that then they had to go home with a bellyache. Their tummy hurt. And there was an awful salt and pepper wind, followed by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly because pepper, it makes you sneeze when you get it close to your nose. And the town was a mess. There were seeds and tomato pulp everywhere. Can you imagine tomatoes all over the place? That looks like a tornado, and it's supposed to be a tomato tornado. There's a person in a boat stuck in it, because a person in a bathtub. It's a pretty goofy book, isn't it? The pictures of how the tornado whips in and whipped them out of wherever they were sitting, whatever they were doing, they got whipped into the wind. The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big. They couldn't keep up with the mess. And everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been hit by giant meatballs. Can you imagine? Not just a little tiny meatball, but gigantic meatball, bigger than anything. And they were heavy, and they were crashing onto the houses. Stores were boarded up, and there was no more school for the children because it wasn't safe to go out. Here's some people trying to go out. They're slipping on the food. Looks like some macaroni over here. And look at those big, huge donuts. Here's the meatballs landing on the roof and making holes in it. Hamburgers, everything. The town is a mess. Food everywhere. Here's a person that got a hamburger, a huge hamburger landed on top of him, and the man is trying to get it off of him. The dog's checking out the food. There's just food everywhere. And people were, it was unsafe. There was ice cream. Oh yeah, I forgot to show you this. There's ice cream over here. All the food sounds good, but when you have it everywhere in a mess and it's heavy and out of the way, it was hard to deal with. And they decided, we're going to have to leave. We can't stay and chew and swallow. This isn't even safe. So the people made rafts, that means like a little flat boat, out of giant pieces of stale bread glued together with peanut butter. So here's two pieces of bread, peanut butter, and then they made a part of the bread like a rudder on a boat. And they made several of these boats, and then they set sail for a new land. And here's the picture. They even got cheese and other things, piece of pizza and cheese that were large, put them together on a pole and made a sailboat. And everyone had a boat of some kind of food and sailed away across the ocean to find a new land. And after sailing for a whole week, that's 7 days, they reached a small friendly town. They built houses for themselves out of their rafts. So they took the rafts apart and made walls for houses. Looks like they're made out of bread, stale bread. The children had begun school again, and the adults found jobs. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to going to a food store, a grocery store, and buying food, because this town didn't have weather for food. And so they had to get used to that, because that was totally new. Here's a picture. In that picture I just showed you, here's a little boy carrying a big bag of food home. He's not used to it. Here's a lady and a mom and dad hugging with their grocery bag next to them. And it shows them settling into their town and enjoying it and getting used to it, and especially getting used to buying their own food. Nothing came down from the sky. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. Nope. No one ever got hit by a hamburger on the head again. Bonk. And nobody dared to go back to chew and swallow to find out what had happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story, and I remember his goodnight kiss. There's Grandpa finishing up the story. It's nighttime outside. There's a little peek of the crescent moon. And they're going, Henry's yawning. And here she is. They're still awake. But Grandpa gave him a goodnight kiss. The next morning, we woke up to see snow falling outside our window. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. So here they are waking up in the morning, looking out. Ooh, it's snow outside. Remember when that's happened? Everything looks so pretty, coated in white snow. and they went to meet Grandpa because they wanted to go sledding with him. And it's funny, but even as we were sliding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top of the hill, and we could almost smell the mashed potatoes. There's this big mound of snow. Here they are coming down on their sleds. Whee! Even Doggy gets to come. There's Grandpa waving. They said, this looks like a big pile of mashed potatoes with some butter on top. Well, what is it really? Big hill with snow on it, and that's the sun. Because it's early in the morning, the sun has just come up and it's coming over the hill, and it's bright and beautiful. But because of that story he told them the night before, they were like, looks a little bit like mashed potatoes and butter. And that's the end of the story. The end. And that was Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Here they are imagining what it would be like. Mom is catching a meatball from the sky, and the dog is ready to catch it if she misses. Was that a funny story? It is pretty silly, but I hope you liked it, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Love you.